How to change a socket. Step 1 is to confirm that the power's off. So do that. I did that by plugging a lamp into this socket, turning off the breaker, and then ensuring that the lamp no longer works. There's several ways to do that though. So what you're going to need is a new socket. This is a grounded socket. You may want a new faceplate. You don't have to get a new one of these, but this one's pretty old and crusty. You may need some pliers, depending on the situation in there, and you'll need a couple of screwdrivers probably. So first step, take out the center screw which holds the plate on. The socket itself is kind of stuck to the plate because it's been painted on. Just trying to break this paint seal. There it comes. Alright, there's our old plate. Next we remove the socket itself. The socket is held by these two screws that hold it into the box. So we'll remove those. This house was built in the 1960s, and so it didn't have sockets with a grounding plug when it was built. Many of the sockets still don't, and I'm starting to slowly upgrade them to grounded sockets. Now you'll see in the box there's a copper wire. This is actually the grounding. Ideally you want to hook that grounding up to the ground, the green connector on the new socket. However, these are metal boxes, and these elements are also grounded. So I'm going to skip that step and rely on the box itself to ground the socket. What you'll see in your old socket is either one set of wires, a white and a black usually, or two sets. Two sets means that this is kind of a daisy chain. So the power comes in on one pair, is usable by this socket, and then goes out on the next pair. You don't really need to worry about which pair is which for now. What you do need to do is look at your socket, and in very tiny writing, you'll see white and black, and it's usually in several languages. So this one says, this is in California, these ones say Blanco, and well, anyway, one of them says white. That means the other one's black. I'll mention it's a good idea to do this kind of project in the daytime with bright light, because if you have the power off in the room, you just can't have the lights on. You can of course use a flashlight or some other light source, or use a lamp with an extension cord from a room that does have power, but it's just smart to do it during the day. Okay, so my white side is this, and the black side is that. So I'm going to orient the socket this way. There's maybe some debate about whether the ground, this third prong, should be up or down. I like to place them up. I've personally had an experience where something dropped onto a socket that was out of the wall a little bit, a metal wire, and caught across those two prongs and sparked. And having the ground there as a small protector would have actually prevented that situation. So I always put them this way, and I think this is the new standard. Okay, so next I'm going to disconnect the old socket fully. Usually you can just take these out enough so you can pull them off. But if you want to take the screws off entirely, there's nothing wrong with it. Okay. for the black. Okay, and now we'll put on the wires onto the new socket. And really it's just the reverse. It's a wise idea to think about how the screw is going to tighten. So in this case, as I tighten these guys on there, it's going to pull the wire more onto it. And that's a good idea to do it that way so that the screw in doesn't push the wire out of the socket. Get these nice and tight. They'll probably be here for 50 years. And the black. I'll say also be gentle about wiggling these wires more than is necessary. They'll probably be fine, but it's annoying if they become too short. And if you bend them back and forth too many times, they are going to break. All right. Now I'm kind of bending the wires so that it'll push in there and not become too crinkly. And then lining up the socket for the socket screws. Get those started. You can of course use the drill for this sort of thing, but it's not really necessary. Hand tools are totally fine for this kind of job unless you've got a whole bunch of them you're doing. And maybe you are. It's not a bad idea to replace all the sockets in your house at once. And notice there's a little wiggle there, and that's so that you can adjust the socket a little bit once you get it screwed on. This socket is pretty hidden, so I don't care too much about the cosmetics. But if you're trying to match, for example, the edge of paint here that's not quite done properly, you might need to wiggle the socket around and get it just right. So you see, you can still wiggle it until it's tight. I'm just going to try to center it on that hole. Go. And again on the top hole. You don't want these to be super tight sometimes. If the socket is sunken in, it'll pull the, if the box is sunken in too much, it's going to pull the box in. But just get them so they're sufficiently snug and nothing's wiggling around. And the last thing to do is get your plate out. Get some of the dust out of there. Get the plate out and screw it in. All right. completes a socket replacement. The next step is to turn on the power, make sure the breaker doesn't immediately flip back, that means you've got a short somewhere, and then test the socket to make sure it's working correctly, and then you're all done.